over 26 years in the Senate, he's been a champion for those who are often ignored. Working families, the middle class, the elderly, children, and the poor. And it's a message that seems to definitely ring true for Vermonters. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Springfield. Thank you. This is a fantastic turnout. I mean, we couldn't find, we had a hard time finding a parking space. So,
hello everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak today on behalf of many college-bound high school students across America and to address Senator Bernie Sanders about the struggles that I and many other students in the United States face. My name is Matthew Power, as you already may know, and I'm a senior at Springfield High School, located across the town from this gymnasium. With my graduation imminent, I'm aware of the financial difficulties I face because of the overwhelming cost of college education. In fact, some of my peers have chosen to forego post-secondary education because they cannot raise enough money to follow a career path that would involve college. Many desire to be doctors, teachers, and lawyers, all with a similar high cost associated with them. However, I want to contribute positively to United States society without worrying about the financial burden of college. I feel that my possibilities for future success would be greater if I could be relieved of the anxiety of this debt. When I consider these notions of debt in college, I find it ironic that we live in a modern and developed country, a nation that is the envy of many people around the globe. Yet American youth are plagued with this unshakable, unreasonable cost of college. I'm convinced that when we make higher education in the United States affordable for all Americans, young and old alike, we will ensure the future success and progress of our great nation. Thank you.
Matthew, thank you very much. Truth of the matter is that democracy and politics are not quite as complicated as some would out to be. What democracy is about is exactly what we are doing this evening. And that is bringing people in the community together to talk about the problems facing the community, the state, the nation, perhaps the world, and to try to come up with ideas about how we go forward. That's about it. Not more complicated than that. But here is the main point that I want to make this evening that we don't talk about enough. The United States of America is not a poor country. We are the richest country in the history of the world. And what that means is, yes, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we certainly can do what many other countries around the world are doing, Matt, and that is making public colleges and universities tuition free. This is not, a harebrained idea that Bernie Sanders thought up in the middle of the night. Does anybody here know how much it costs to go to college in Germany? Anybody know?
Zero.
Zero. And what about Sweden? I was at a meeting in Washington a couple of years ago, and I was talking about higher education, and I said, in Scandinavia, college education is free. And a young man jumped up and he said, Senator, no, you're wrong. I come from Finland. It is not free. In Finland, they pay us to go to school. Point is, in many areas, and we'll get to them, relatively few people talk about it. I think a few more people are talking about it now, and that is income and wealth inequality. And that is, while we are the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we also have more income and wealth inequality than almost any major country on earth, and it is worse today than in any time since 1928, the year before the Great Depression. What does that mean? What it means is that in America today, the top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. What it means is that in the last 30 years, there has been a massive transfer of wealth, a redistribution of wealth. Now, many of our Republican friends get nervous when we talk about redistribution of wealth because they worry that it's going to go from the rich to the middle class. But in the last 30 years, we have seen the middle class shrink and trillions of dollars go to the top 1%. We got bad roads. We got many bridges which are in desperate need of repair. All over this country, we have water systems where people turning on the faucet are not getting drinking water, clean drinking water, wastewater systems, levees and dams, rail system that needs major repair. $1 trillion investment can create up to 15 million jobs in Vermont and in every state in this country. So I want to create those jobs. We'll build our permanent infrastructure. How do you put gas in the car? How do you deal with getting your car insured? How do you deal with health care on $21,000 a year? Anyone know how to do it? You can't do it, all right? Now, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, it seems to me that anybody who works 40 hours a week should be earning a living wage. The federal, if you can believe it, the federal minimum wage and the minimum wage in a number of states is $7.25 an hour. Can you imagine that? $7.25 an hour. All right, Vermont, that's high. Other states, it's higher yet. In my view, we have got to pass in Congress minimum wage legislation, and I will shortly be introducing that legislation that moves this country to a $15 an hour minimum wage. And you know what happens when people earn a decent wage? They're going to go out and spend that money in the community, and that will create even more jobs.
Went to the VA to get help in the mental health area, as two friends of his committed suicide within 2 days of each other. As he went in, he was denied being seen. They said that they didn't have enough staff. They were told that he just couldn't be seen. Is there something that's going to be done that...
That took place where? White River?
Yep. Yes, sir.
When did that take place?
About a month ago.
Okay. Haley, get her name and her telephone number. All right. We have worked very hard. And in fact, when I was chairman of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, we put $5 billion into the VA to make sure that they do provide quality care to our veterans. We will find out what happened in your husband's case. Okay. Yep. Haley, you'll get her name. Okay.
My name is George Karakakis, and I run the HCRS, the local community mental health agency, serving Windham and Windsor County. And I'd like to say that our mental health care system in Vermont is in crisis. We are helping people who are homeless, who are unemployed, who are dealing with poverty, who have significant mental health and substance abuse issues and developmental disability issues, and we're in crisis. People need a chance. We don't need walls. We don't need to build walls. We need to break down walls so people can have access.
I think it's fair to say that in Vermont, Senator Leahy and Congressman Welch will in general agree with what I'm telling you. So you don't have to worry about your delegation.
Right.
But what you have to do is get on the phone, all right? I came recently, I was in West Virginia, a state that will be unbelievably decimated. And you have a senator there who's thinking about repealing it. What you've got to do is get on the phone and talk to people all over this country. You have national organizations, right? And tell them to stop being nice. Let's be clear. If the Republican plan, there are studies out there, it's common sense. If you do not have health care and you get sick and you don't go to the doctor, what happens? You get sicker. And I have talked to doctors in this state and all over the country who tell me that they lose patients who by the time they walk into the door have a terminal illness that could have been cured if they walked in the door when they should have. Let us be clear. And anybody wants to quote me on this, quote me on it. Thousands of people will die if they lose their health insurance and are unable to go to the doctor or cannot afford to go to the hospital when they need. Thousands. A lot more people will die from this legislation than die from the tragedy of 9/11.
One of the other things that in my experience as a healthcare provider, I see people, I hear them, they call me up and say, please thank the doctor, but I can't afford that medicine. What can we do to fight the pharmaceutical companies?
Oh, you're touching a very sensitive nerve. Let me be as blunt as I can be, Kathy. I suspect that Wall Street, which has endless amounts of money, is probably the most powerful political force in Washington. Secondly, not far behind, is the pharmaceutical industry. Right now, if you go to your drugstore tomorrow to fill a prescription that you've had for 10 years, the druggist can tell you, well, I'm sorry, Joe, but the price of your medicine has doubled. And that is happening all over this country. Hepatitis C is a very serious illness. A drug recently came out which took us a major step forward in treating hepatitis C. That's the very good news. Do you know how much a full treatment under that drug cost? $87,000. $1,000 a pill. Meanwhile, that particular company made $18 billion in profit last year, I believe. So what do we have to do? We have to do a couple of things, and I'm helping to lead that effort in Congress. Number one, we have the absurdity that we pay the highest prices in the world because the drug companies today can charge anybody any price they want. The only institution that negotiates with the drug companies are the Veterans Administration, and they get the lowest cost prescription drugs in this country. Medicare does not. So we've got legislation that we're going to coalesce around that says that Medicare must negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry. Number two, some of you may remember a long time ago, I took a busload, several busloads of Vermonters from Franklin County, northern Vermont, across the Canadian border to buy low-cost prescription drugs there. We have introduced legislation just a few weeks ago that has 20 co-sponsors that says that pharmacists and distributors and you should be able to purchase the lowest cost brand name prescription drugs from Canada and in a few years from any country on earth. The prices that you are paying for medicine in many cases is 50% that cost in Canada and maybe much lower in other countries. We allow that, you force the drug companies to lower their prices in this country. Those are two approaches that we're working on. Is that if the Democratic Party does not get its act together and start standing with working families, start having the guts to take on Wall Street and the insurance companies and the drug companies, that there are a lot of people, a growing number of people who are sharing your sentiment. So we're making some progress, but in fact, in my view, the Democratic Party needs to be fundamentally restructured. We need to be a grassroots party, welcoming young people and working people to help set the direction. Absolutely.
But here's my question. I know a lot of people, and you kind of just touched on this, I know a lot of people who are really good people, who are hard workers, and they're good, loving people who voted for Trump. And they support Trump. And it blows my mind, and it makes me go crazy. Because Donald Trump is a piece of crap. Let's be real. Let's be real. So my question to you, Bernie, as my hero, what is the I don't want to get in fights with people. I don't want to, you know, what is the best way to talk to these people and tell them, listen, you can't keep voting against your best interests. You've got to do something, you know?
Good. Well, first of all, thank you for beginning that conversation. All right. I think what we have to acknowledge is there will be differences of opinion. But sometimes it's a funny thing about politics. Is if one issue arises, and I'm thinking of guns, or I'm thinking of abortion, or issues like that, people go, well, I can't vote. Yeah, they're sending my job to China. Yeah, they took away my health care. But I disagree with you that you're pro-choice. And I think what we have to look at is the totality of politics, all of the issues, all right? So I think many of Trump's working class people asked him, do you think we should raise the minimum wage to a living wage? Not all of them will say yes, many of them will. Do you think we should throw 24 million people off of health insurance or significantly increase the cost of health insurance for older people? No. And you know what? They'll say, no, we should not do that. In terms of trade policy, Trump talks a good game. I'm still wanting to see his legislation, which will make sure that companies here do not go to China. Talk to them about that. So there are a lot of issues. On education, ask them whether they think, if they're working class, their kids have a right to go to college. And then tell them that Trump is about to cut significant programs that make it easier for kids to afford college. Those are the issues I think you should talk about. Thank you.
In front of me are two of my students that have history here in this school. What do I say to them tomorrow to give them hope, joy, and joy about tomorrow?
What I think we can say to the young people is that this is not the only difficult moment in American history. These are tough times. And I think we began the program, I think the superintendent was talking about, you know, watching television, getting upset by what he sees, and millions of people are. But we have come through difficult periods before. Okay, you following me? There was a time in this country where slavery existed. There was a time in this country where girls your age never dreamed about going to college or getting the kinds of jobs that they wanted. There was a time in this country where kids your age worked in factories and in farms rather than going to school. But people came together and made change. And as the young man from Brattleboro said a moment ago, what we are seeing all over this country are young people standing up and fighting back. And the most important point that I want to make is that on almost all of the major issues facing this country, Donald Trump's position is a minority position. It is not the majority position. His views do not necessarily reflect the majority of the American people. And don't forget that. So what your job is to understand that democracy is not a spectator sport. You know what I mean by that? It means you have got to be involved in the democratic process. And you think about the way you can do that. Okay? Thank you, guys. Mr. Superintendent, thank you for giving us this facility. And let me conclude. Despair is not an option. Our job as Vermonters, as Americans, stand up, fight back, and we're going to win this thing. Thank you.
Yeah, I have biology. You might have to go though. He's a busy man.